Today we're talking about mage builds. Before we begin, apparently YouTube has been a bit wonky about notifying people about new uploads lately, so if you want to make sure not to miss out on any videos, there is a bell next to the subscription sign, like right down below. If you're subscribed, feel free to click on that and turn the notifications on for you if you haven't yet. Also, shout out to Trelly Rally and Warfare X, who basically gave me some pointers, some feedback on the builds that I made and some improvements to them. There is a link down below to Trelly Rally's YouTube if you want to check him out. With that, let's get started. We're gonna go through all mages in 2 videos, and this is gonna be the first one. This is gonna be the one for more somewhat of a default mage build that works for many mages, and I'll address all the variables that you can have in that, all the flex options, all that stuff. And in the next one, we will look at the more unique, specific ones that don't really fit under the standard build. Otherwise, this video would have just been way too much work for a single day, way too long to watch in one go anyway, so I figured I would split it up. Let's begin with the standard build, as I would call it. What you will see here first is kind of a weird build, because it actually doesn't have an item in the second slot. So the items here are Soulstone, Shoes of the Magi, Obsidian Shard, and Rod of Tahuti. Why? Now, let's begin with Soulstone. I think that Vampiric Shroud is still decent, it's still good. If you need something defensive against an aggressive early enemy, or for example the enemy has Loki and solo and you're expecting some rotations or something like that, then some extra health from Vamp Shroud can be nice. Generally, if you can afford to, on most mages it's at the moment better to go into Soulstone, simply because it gives you more early clear, allows for more faster rotations because of that, and all that kind of stuff that comes from it. So I would generally recommend Soulstone. Vamp Shroud is not impossible. The other 3 items are just basically mandatory for almost every mage. Shoes of the Magi gives you that early penetration, which you need on most guards. Obsidian Shard gives you that percentage penetration, which you will need against many of the tankier guards. And Rod of Tahuti gives you a massive power boost that you just want at some point of the game. What is important here is that the second slot is empty. You are usually not gonna finish that second slot item first. You're actually gonna finish your shoes first. But you don't want to start the game with shoes. You don't want to start the game with Soulstone plus shoots tier 1 and some pots. You want to start the game with Soulstone and some aggressive option or some MP5 option to be able to compete with the enemy in middle lane, and then after that, when you back, finish your boots, maybe get some more pots, and then finish that item entirely, or go for something else, depending on what you want to go for. To all of this, there are exceptions that completely function differently, but those will be addressed in the next video. Here we have 3 starting items for that second slot. Tiny Trinket, Lost Artifact, and Imperial Helmet. There are some more if you want to go into Warlock Sass and stuff like that, but I would say these 3 are the ones that I would recommend, especially when you're just learning how to play the lane or you're not so sure about your builds yet. Tiny Trinket is the one that gives you the most sustain and allows you to get an extra pot on top, so that's really helpful and can work in various regards. If your guard either needs more mana pots and wants to use abilities very early before he gets any more MP5, or if you just want that little bit of lane sustain. Imperial Helmet is mostly the default actually, because mostly you will be stuck against 3 physicals, and when that is the case, then Imperial Helmet will have you a lot, just because of that defense that it offers against ganks especially. Lost Artifact is the standard, especially when you go into Doom Orb, but also if you just need a little more MP5 and that's your focus here, just to stay in the lane a little longer, stuff like that. And from there, we have the options that we're going to build into after finishing Shoes of the Magi. The most dominant one here at the moment being Dynasty Plate Helm, for that extra damage, extra penetration, all that kind of stuff, and the physical defense, which really helps against early ganks. In the same sense, there is Celestial Legion Helmet, which helps if the enemy team has 2 Hunters, or Mercury, or Hunbatsu, or anyone who would go crit really, Naja as well. But you have to keep in mind that next patch, this item will be more expensive, and a little less beneficial, so not as accessible as an early item anymore. Just be aware of this at least. I wouldn't say you shouldn't build it anymore, but be aware that it's more of a situational counter item now. Then there is also Book of Thoth for those who want to stack. There is Doom Orb for those who want to stack more aggressively, though I would be a little more careful here. I would only recommend this on mages that have at least some kind of mobility to not die too fast. There is Warlock Sash for those who want to stack for late game and have more survivability. Not that much of a popular item overall, but still an option that is there. And there is Pythagoras Piece for those who want to build something out of their tiny trinket. I would highly recommend Pythagoras Piece over Bancroft's Talon, as that item simply doesn't offer enough at the moment. But once again, this is a bit of a choice thing as well. So you have your 4 items that you pretty much always want to build, and then you have that one situational slot, which should always be finished before Obsidian Shard, just so you don't build that percentage penetration too early and get something effective going that helps you with Rod of Tahuti as well. After that, we have 2 situational slots, which really depends on which guard you're playing and who you're playing against. Those options are Soul Reaver, if you're just looking for some extra burst, for example on Scylla. Pythagoras Piece if you haven't built it early on, if you're looking for some cooldown reduction. In that regard, it's in my opinion better than Chronos Pendant at the moment if you look at the overall stats. Polynomicon if you want some extra burst outside of your regular abilities. This works really well on some mages, and I feel like this item is slightly underrated at the moment. Spear of Desolation if you absolutely have to have that extra flat pendant, you have a ridiculous amount of gold. Rarely built, but when it's built it can be devastating. Just don't build it on Scylla, please, that doesn't make sense. Chronos Pendant if you're absolutely certain that you need the highest amount of CDR possible. In my opinion, only really important on guards that need to max out CDR as high as it gets, for example Janus or maybe Thoth. Magi's Blessing, an item that's slowly coming back into the meta and really counters specific guards like Aho Kweng, so worth considering if you don't need any more burst and you just need some survivability. In the same sense, Winged Blade, also a great item to counter specific guards like Nemesis, giving you more survivability. And last but not least, Gem of Isolation, an item that gives you a decent amount of power now and also gives more utility to your team by slowing enemies down. I realize this is quite a fair bit to take in, but these are pretty much all your options and you can't go too wrong with them. You really just have to consider if the enemies are mostly physical damage or magical damage and a little bit of what you personally prefer for your playstyle. The guards that I think fit into this standard build are quite a few, and we're going to go through them and talk about them quickly. The first one is Agni. With Agni, I would say Vamshroud and Soulstone are just kind of equal, somewhat at least. Obviously you get more burst out of Soulstone still, but that will always be the case. And the standard build overall is really fine for him. He's got a lot of flex options, but you can't go too wrong on Agni. You can go into some cooldown reduction or more penetration, both kind of works in its own ways. Apwash. Apwash, in my opinion, works a little better with Soulstone, simply because he can heal himself up anyways. He can heal on his corpses, so that's not quite as important. And therefore, instead of going for more sustain, you can go for that build and then go for a standard build. However, he does benefit greatly from having some health later in the build. He's one of those guards where Warlock Sash can be nice, simply because he doesn't have that much escape potential otherwise. In the same sense, he makes very great use of Gem of Isolation, which will slow the enemies down more, and he also makes good use of cooldown reduction to keep his corpses up more, to heal himself up and stuff like that. The next one is quite a few names down, and that would be Habwa. Habwa, in my opinion, can go for both starter items and just go with a standard build. High burst is always great for him, that works in his favor, but many options are possible. Isis can also work very well with the standard build. Soulstone is preferred here because she can hit multiple targets with the AoE swing, getting multiple stacks at once, and also wants to bully early on anyways. For her, Tiny Trinket is especially good to get that extra mana potion, get some sustain, and get more clear bully potential very, very early into the game where she has high aggression. Janus can go for the standard build. What I recommend with Janus is that you should probably consider getting cooldown reduction boots. I know many people think they're not good because, you know, you're losing out on that early pen, blah blah blah, but Nolisa has proven that even in the SPL, even on the highest level, cooldown boots can work very well, and he just works so well off cooldown, it's ridiculous. And his case, I would even say get Chronos Pendant as well if you want to, because he can just avoid anyone and get in, get out, poke, get in again, all that kind of stuff, much better than any other mage really, so I would always recommend that as an option at least. Kukulkan can pretty much go for the standard build. With Kukulkan, I would recommend going Book of Thoth, simply because it helps his kit so much. I know some people also like to go Warlock Sash. You're kind of missing out on a little bit there, but it's also not a bad item. Just don't do both. Nox can pretty much go for the standard build. Both starts are possible for her. Cooldown reduction helps her a lot overall because she just has this one chain and when it's down, it's down. But she is very flexible. Same with Nuwa. Nuwa actually works pretty great off both pen and cooldown reduction. Just a matter of choosing here how you want to play her. and the standard build with any starter works for her. Ragin, I would recommend Soulstone on simply because he wants that early aggression, early burst. Other than that, standard build is absolutely fine. You can look for some more pen or some more cooldown reduction. Once again, both works. Scylla, Soulstone start for sure, so she has that early clear, which she really desperately needs. Standard build overall. She likes higher damage compared to a little less cooldown reduction because she can reset her ultimate anyways as long as she killed someone. So keep that in mind when building her. Toth, I would say Soulstone start just to give him some early clear advantage. I personally also like Shoes of Focus very, very much on him. He gets some free penetration from his passive, and even though it comes online a little later, he does not really have much early aggression either way. And what you have to keep in mind is that penetration doesn't help you with clearing really. You only get 5 extra power, and his early clears, you know, it's kinda until a certain point. So Shoes of Focus will just help you much more in late game, and that's where you want to get to with him. And as such, I really prefer that, but I can see a point being made for Shoes of the Magi as well, especially due to the increased burst on his ultimate if you get as much pen as possible. So both works here. I just personally like Shoes of Focus just to use as escape more often and stuff as well. Then there is Vulcan, where you can just go for any starter and the standard build. Very, very simple, very flexible in his options. Sometimes a little tankier stuff helps him a bit because his escape isn't the greatest. Zeus, exactly in the same boat. Also not the greatest escapes, but very flexible when it comes to everything else. I would probably usually prefer Soulstone, but once again, both starts are possible. And last but not least, Sean Kui, who I think works better with Soulstone because he can double stack it with his 3, and he also has built-in lifesteal, or healing rather anyway, so he's not as dependent on that. But then again, being tanky is very nice for him, so later you want to look for some items that kind of supplement that in a way. That is all for this video. This is the first part. In the next part, we're going to take apart all those more special cases that are a little more complex, that have their very specific builds that are maybe played in other roles as well, and we'll look at them a little more closely. I'd like to point out at the end here that, at least from the ones that will be addressed in the next video, Ra can also very much go for the standard builds, for more damage focused build, if you want to play him that way. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.